There are few Hollywood couples that seem more bulletproof than Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. For over a decade, they've made the impossible look effortless, balancing massive careers, a growing family, and a love story that had the whole world rooting for them. Their public banter, witty Instagram exchanges, and red carpet smiles crafted an image of perfect, enviable bliss. But in the dazzling glow of fame, shadows thrive, and sometimes, the most beautiful facades hide the deepest cracks. It started quietly. A whisper at an afterparty, a lingering glance caught by an overeager photographer, a hint of tension in an otherwise perfect photo op. At first, no one paid attention. Ryan and Blake were untouchable, after all. They were the couple, glamorous, funny, relatable, even with their millions. Then came Elena Hart. Barely 24, Elena had made her name as a supporting actress in the indie hit Silver Crossroads. Her performance, raw and magnetic, earned her critical acclaim and a cult following. It also caught the attention of Hollywood's biggest players, and apparently Ryan Reynolds himself. When they met on the set of Nightshade, a dark psychological thriller where Ryan starred and Elena played a minor, but pivotal role, no one could have predicted the chemistry that would ignite between them. At first, it was innocent. Rehearsals that went long into the night, intense conversations about character motivations, laughter that carried down empty studio halls. Blake, ever supportive, visited the set with their daughters, chatting easily with the crew, and even sharing coffee with Elena once or twice. But those who knew Ryan best noticed the change first. His eyes, always so mischievous, carried a different spark when he spoke to Elena. His jokes grew softer around her, his defenses lowered. She, in turn, seemed hypnotized, drawn in by his charm, his attention, the magnetic pull of a man who had the world at his feet but chose to spend his precious moments with her. Rumors began to slither through the industry like smoke through a keyhole. "He's spending a lot of time with that girl," one insider muttered at a cocktail party in West Hollywood. "Way more than necessary for their scenes." Still, Ryan and Blake presented a united front. Their Instagram pages overflowed with playful jabs and anniversary tributes. But behind closed doors, sources whispered, the atmosphere had shifted. Blake, ever perceptive, wasn't blind. She saw the way Ryan's eyes lingered on his phone, the late-night messages disguised as script revisions, the sudden, unexplained trips to review footage. It all came to a head one unseasonably cold night in early March. Blake, following a gnawing instinct she could no longer ignore, showed up unannounced at a wrap party for Nightshade. It was supposed to be a low-key event, just cast and close crew. No photographers, no press. Blake walked in wearing a tailored coat and a careful smile, weaving through clusters of laughing actors. And there, in the dim light of the rooftop bar, she saw him. Ryan, his head tilted back in laughter, Elena perched close beside him, their knees almost, but not quite, touching. It was a tableau of intimacy so subtle, so practiced, that to anyone else it might have seemed like nothing. To Blake, it was everything. The confrontation was quiet, almost surgical in its precision. A whispered conversation near the bathrooms. Elena slipping away into the night, her face pale. Ryan, jaw tight, avoiding Blake's eyes. By the end of the evening, the cracks in their perfect marriage were no longer invisible. They were gaping wounds, threatening to swallow them both whole. But this was just the beginning. Hollywood may have been built on glitter and dreams, but behind every golden story lies the dark weight of betrayal. And as Ryan and Blake's fairy tale threatened to crumble, Elena Hart found herself thrust into a spotlight far harsher than any she had ever known. The first domino had fallen, and there was no turning back. In Hollywood, deception wears designer clothes and flashes a charming smile. It sips champagne at rooftop parties and whispers false promises beneath glittering chandeliers. And as the days slipped into weeks after that fateful night, Ryan Reynolds found himself dancing a dangerous waltz, one misstep away from losing everything. At home, the air between him and Blake had thickened, heavy with things left unsaid. Their once easy conversations became strained negotiations about schedules, press appearances, and the girls' ballet recitals. They still smiled for the cameras when necessary, but behind closed doors, Blake moved like a ghost through their home, and Ryan felt the gnawing weight of guilt clawing at his chest. But the heart wants what it wants. And Ryan's heart, confused and reckless, kept drifting back to Elena Hart. They had agreed, no texts, no calls. Not after that night. Elena had been the one to insist. "It's too dangerous," she had whispered, her fingers brushing his briefly as they parted ways in the parking garage, shadows swallowing them whole. "We can't." And yet, a week later, Ryan found himself parked outside a dim, tucked-away coffee shop on the east side of Los Angeles, a place where no paparazzi ventured, where washed-up musicians and aspiring poets nursed bitter espressos and chipped mugs. Elena was already there, seated by the window, sunglasses hiding most of her face, a wool cap pulled low over her forehead. Their conversations were frantic, guilty, and electric. They spoke in half-sentences, unfinished thoughts. "I can't. Stop thinking about it," Elena admitted one evening, voice breaking. "Me neither," Ryan confessed, his thumb brushing hers across the tabletop. It was wrong. It was insane. It was exhilarating. They met in stolen hours, empty dressing rooms, late-night drives down the Pacific Coast Highway, the occasional clandestine weekend when Ryan claimed he was working on location scouting for an upcoming project. Every kiss was a betrayal, every touch a brick removed from the carefully constructed tower of his life. Meanwhile, Blake wasn't idle. She knew. Not just the hollow excuses or the forced smiles, she knew the shape of her husband's betrayal the way a sailor knows the coming of a storm. She had seen the subtle signs, the way Ryan's jokes didn't quite land anymore, the way he flinched when she reached for him in bed. But Blake Lively had built her life in Hollywood by mastering the art of appearances. She wouldn't crumble. Not yet. Instead, she hired Devin Marks, one of the most discreet private investigators in Los Angeles, known for his brutal efficiency and silence. No one, not even Ryan, suspected a thing. It didn't take long. Photographs. Dates. Times. A picture of Ryan's hand brushing the small of Elena's back as they slipped into a hotel under false names. A recording of whispered promises exchanged behind tinted car windows. Blake studied them all with the detached precision of a surgeon examining an X-ray. The damage was undeniable. But what should she do? The logical part of her mind, the actress trained to survive scandals and reinvent herself, told her to prepare, to build her exit plan, to shield the girls at all costs. But the woman who had loved Ryan Reynolds for over a decade, who had built a life, a family, and a future with him, found herself paralyzed with grief and fury. Meanwhile, Ryan's life spun faster and faster toward a collision he could no longer avoid. The studio announced a surprise press tour for Nightshade, pairing Ryan and Elena for interviews and promotional events. Publicists raved about their natural chemistry and undeniable on-screen connection, oblivious, or willfully blind, to the wildfire raging just beneath the surface. It was during a live interview, seated side by side on a velvet couch before a national audience, that the world caught its first glimpse of something more between Ryan Reynolds and Elena Hart. A too-long glance. A flushed smile. A shared, secret joke that left Elena biting her lip and Ryan chuckling with the easy, intimate laughter reserved for lovers, not colleagues. Social media exploded. "Do you see that? Ryan and Elena have major chemistry. Poor Blake. Is she watching this?" Blake was watching. Oh, she was watching. And she was done waiting. The next morning, the news broke not to TMZ, not to a gossip blog, but to the New York Times. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, trouble in paradise? It was subtle, tasteful, a far cry from the usual tabloid bloodbath. But the message was clear. Cracks in the golden couple's armor were no longer hidden. The world was watching. The dance of lies had begun its final, fatal act. And none of them, not Ryan, not Blake, not Elena, would emerge unchanged. The morning the New York Times article dropped, Ryan Reynolds woke up to a hurricane. His phone buzzed nonstop, texts from his publicist, missed calls from his agent, even a frantic email from the Nightshade director warning him to get ahead of the narrative. By noon, his name was trending on every social media platform, tangled with words he couldn't stand to read. Cheater, betrayal, scandal. For the first time in his career, Ryan wasn't the charming, untouchable hero. He was the villain in his own story. Blake's silence was louder than any tabloid headline. She hadn't confronted him yet. She hadn't thrown his things onto the front lawn or served him divorce papers. Instead, she moved like an architect of quiet devastation, measured, methodical, inevitable. Every day she went through the motions of life with mechanical precision. School drop-offs, charity galas, photo ops. She smiled for the cameras, posed with fans, posted curated snippets of her life. But behind that shining mask, she was planning her escape. Ryan could feel it, the gathering storm, the quickening drumbeat of consequences he could no longer outrun. And still, he couldn't stay away from Elena. Their secret meetings grew desperate. haunted by the knowledge that they were racing toward a cliff with no brakes. Elena, usually composed and cool under pressure, now wore fear like a second skin. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered one night, curled against Ryan in a rented bungalow by the beach. Her voice trembled. "I didn't want to be the reason your life fell apart." Ryan brushed a strand of hair from her face, his heart breaking in 1,000 ways. "It's not your fault," he said. But even as the words left his lips, he wondered if they were true. Guilt gnawed at him until it became a living thing inside his chest. Every kiss tasted like betrayal. Every touch carried the weight of promises broken. Yet he couldn't give her up. He couldn't. Meanwhile, Blake made her move. Her team leaked a statement. Brief, devastating, surgical. After much reflection and with deep love and respect for each other, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have decided to separate. The words were a dagger wrapped in silk. They gave no room for speculation, no opportunity for messy headlines. It was simply over. The world went into mourning. Fans posted tributes to the end of an era. Heartbroken tweets flooded the internet. Paparazzi camped outside their house. And Blake? She remained silent, untouchable, a queen surveying the battlefield after the war had already been won. Ryan saw the news not from Blake herself, but from a push notification on his phone. His hands trembled as he read it. He called her. No answer. He texted. No response. It was done. And for the first time in his life, Ryan Reynolds realized he was utterly, completely alone. He went to Elena's apartment that night, desperate for solace, for something real amid the ruins. She opened the door, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with red. "I saw," she said simply. Ryan stepped forward, heart aching, needing her more than he'd ever needed anything. But Elena didn't move. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not like this. Not with the whole world hating me. Elena, no." She backed away as if he had struck her. "You think this is a love story, Ryan? This is a tragedy." Her words hit him harder than any headline, any rumor. Because deep down, he knew she was right. This wasn't the ending of a love story. This was the wreckage left behind by two people who had lost themselves in a moment of weakness and now had to live with the cost. Ryan left her standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. He got into his car. He drove nowhere, everywhere, for hours, the city's neon lights blurring into a smear of guilt and regret. By sunrise, Ryan Reynolds was no longer the man he had once been. He was something else entirely, something broken, something lost. And as the first rays of dawn spilled over the Hollywood hills, Ryan realized, some mistakes can't be fixed. Some mirrors, once shattered, will never reflect the same image again. The aftermath of Ryan Reynolds' divorce announcement was a whirlwind of chaos, but it wasn't just the end of a marriage that captivated the world. It was the destruction of an empire, or what it seemed like one. The glossy Hollywood image of Ryan and Blake, the adored it couple, had fractured in the most public way possible, and the world was watching every step of Ryan's fall from grace. Public opinion was brutal. Social media, once a place for fanfare and cute family pictures, was now an unforgiving courtroom. The reactions were polarized. Blake's supporters were fierce in their loyalty, showering her with sympathy, while Ryan became the subject of endless mockery and scorn. The once sought-after bachelor had morphed into the face of betrayal. Ryan had been prepared for the fallout, but nothing could have prepared him for the weight of the silent judgment, the eyes that followed him everywhere. Every coffee run, every outing, every moment in front of a camera, all scrutinized for signs of regret, for evidence that he was somehow broken by the consequences of his actions. And he was broken in more ways than one. Yet, the hardest part wasn't the public's disdain. It wasn't the pressure to perform in interviews or the criticism he received for the breakup of his family. No, the hardest part was the absence of Blake. She had disappeared from the public eye, retreating into a fortress of silence, letting the media frenzy rage without ever uttering a word. It was, in its own way, so much worse than a public confrontation. Ryan's world was falling apart, and Blake's refusal to engage felt like the final dagger. He had always been able to make her laugh, to win her over with charm and humor. But now, nothing he did seemed to matter. Days passed, and the calls, the texts, they went unanswered. He had tried reaching out, writing her letters, sending flowers to their home. At one point, he even visited their old favorite spots, hoping for a chance encounter, a spark of the connection they had once shared. But Blake was gone, and the space she left behind felt like an abyss. Yet, amid the debris, there was one voice Ryan could still rely on: Elena. She, too, had retreated from the spotlight, wary of becoming the face of his scandal. The press had painted her as the other woman, a homewrecker, and although it wasn't entirely fair, Elena didn't know how to defend herself without making it worse. Their affair, if that's what it had even been, had been born in the shadow of guilt and secrets. And now, the weight of it was suffocating. The distance between Ryan and Elena grew, not because of love lost, but because of the brokenness they carried with them. Elena's shame was palpable, and Ryan's regret gnawed at him every waking moment. They had thought they were starting something beautiful, something real, but all it had created was a public spectacle that none of them were ready to handle. Work became his only distraction. Ryan buried himself in his projects, throwing himself into new roles, hoping that acting could temporarily drown out the echoes of his mistakes. Yet, even the films that should have been his escape felt hollow. Each line he delivered, each character he embodied, only served to remind him of how far he had fallen from the man he once was. How could he perform with sincerity when his own life felt like a lie? But the industry had a strange way of moving forward. New projects arrived, offers piled up, the studios wanted Ryan. They always wanted Ryan. The producers called, the directors sent scripts, and the buzz around Nightshade seemed to keep growing, despite the personal chaos surrounding its star. Yet, the offers felt empty to him. Nothing was the same. Even his closest friends, the ones who had stood by him for years, began pulling away. Some out of respect for Blake, some because they just didn't know how to navigate the fallout. He couldn't blame them. They saw him for who he had become, a man caught in a storm of his own making. But despite everything, he couldn't stop thinking about Blake. He couldn't stop wishing, hoping that there was still a way back. Maybe if he could just prove to her that he was sorry, prove that he hadn't meant for any of this to happen, maybe she would give him a chance to make it right. But deep down, Ryan knew that the window had closed. Blake was no longer just his wife, she was his ghost, a memory haunting every step he took. The distance between them felt too vast, the space too wide. She wasn't just gone physically, she had vanished from his life in every way that mattered. That was when the press reached out to him again. This time, it wasn't just a call for a comment or an interview. This time, the question was more pointed, more direct. Ryan, is there any chance of reconciliation with Blake? Can you ever fix what you've broken? The question hit him like a slap across the face. What could he say? Could he fix this? Was there any way back to the life he had once had, to the woman he had once loved? Ryan sat in the quiet of his kitchen, phone in hand, staring out the window as the world around him continued to spin. The answer, when it came, wasn't one he had expected. He called Blake. This time, her phone rang through. No voicemail. No automatic rejection. The silence on the other end was deafening. Blake, he whispered, his voice cracking with the weight of everything unsaid. I don't know how we got here, but I need you to know that I am sorry. I'll never be able to undo the damage, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix it. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, if you can somehow look at me again, I swear I'll make it right. And then, as if the universe had finally decided to answer him, the line clicked. She was there. But Blake said nothing. And Ryan finally realized, sometimes, some things are beyond repair. The silence between them said it all. Weeks passed after that last, silent phone call. Ryan waited, hoped, tried to believe that silence could somehow turn into forgiveness. But hope, like everything else he had once relied on, began to rot from the inside. Blake never responded. She didn't need to. Her silence was the response, louder, clearer, more devastating than any shouted words. Ryan finally understood. Blake had chosen herself. And maybe, just maybe, she had to. He sat at the long oak dining table of their, now her, home for the last time, the late afternoon light stretching shadows across the floor. The house was hollow without the girls' laughter, without the music Blake used to hum while she cooked, without the vibrant life that had once made it more than just walls and furniture. Now, it was just a beautiful, empty tomb. The divorce proceedings moved quietly, mercifully distant from the carnivorous tabloids that had initially feasted on their downfall. Blake's team negotiated everything with icy precision: custody, assets, press strategy. There was no dramatic courtroom battle. No vicious leaks. Blake didn't want revenge. She wanted freedom. And she got it. Ryan signed the papers one rainy Thursday afternoon, his signature barely legible as his hand shook slightly. His lawyer, a bland man in a pressed gray suit, patted his shoulder with a practiced air of sympathy. "You're doing the right thing, Ryan," he said. But it didn't feel like it. It felt like dying. Meanwhile, Elena Hart's star rose in Hollywood. Not without bruises, of course. Not without late-night social media hate storms and whispered accusations at every audition. But Hollywood has a short memory, and Elena's talent was undeniable. Ryan watched from the sidelines as she booked her first lead role, a brooding, indie drama about love and betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on him. They saw each other one last time. It was at a quiet restaurant in Silver Lake, a place they had once daydreamed of visiting together when everything still felt new and forbidden. She wore a simple blue dress, no makeup, hair pulled back in a loose knot. "Hi," she said, offering him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hi," Ryan said, swallowing the lump in his throat. They talked, haltingly, politely, like old friends who had outgrown each other. They didn't speak about the past. They didn't speak about Blake. When the check came, they both reached for it instinctively, then laughed, a sad, brittle sound. At the door, Elena looked up at him, her eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "I hope you find happiness, Ryan," she said. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but she was already gone, disappearing into the crowd like a dream he was waking from too late. And Ryan knew. Whatever they had shared, whatever spark had once burned between them, it was over. Ashes. Months later, Ryan stood backstage at a small charity event in New York. He was scheduled to present an award, and despite the chaos of the past year, his name still carried enough weight to draw crowds. His team had advised him to keep a low profile, but this, supporting a charity Blake had once championed, somehow felt like the right thing to do. As he waited to be introduced, he caught a glimpse of the audience through the curtain. Blake was there. She sat at a round table near the stage, radiant in a simple black dress, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. She laughed at something someone said, her hand resting lightly on the tablecloth, a glass of wine untouched before her. Ryan's heart twisted in his chest. She was beautiful, untouchable, gone. When he stepped onto the stage, he felt her gaze on him, calm, cool, curious. Not angry, not hurt, just distant. Like a star glimpsed from Earth, burning brightly, but impossibly far away. Ryan delivered his speech, his voice steady, his smile practiced. He cracked a few jokes. The audience laughed. They still loved him, or at least the version of him they remembered. When he finished, he caught Blake's eyes for a split second. She smiled, polite, kind, final, and then turned back to her table, to her new life, without him. Ryan walked off the stage into the wings, his chest hollow, his heart quiet for the first time in months. Some stories don't have happy endings. Some love stories end not with a bang, but with a quiet, almost tender goodbye. Ryan Reynolds learned that lesson the hard way. And in the end, maybe it was better this way. Maybe, after everything, he would finally learn to live with the echoes of what he had lost. Maybe, someday, he would forgive himself. But for now, he simply disappeared into the crowd, another face among many, a man learning to live with the consequences of his choices. The curtain fell. The story ended. And life, messy, painful, beautiful, went on.